The biting cold penetrated Ivan Petrov's worn boots as he trudged across the snow-covered field. His weathered hands, cracked from winter and work, clutched a wooden pail. In the distance, two Nazi soldiers watched from the road, their breath visible in the frigid morning air. Once, this land had been his sanctuary, now it was his prison. The old farmhouse, passed down through 3 generations, stood as a silent witness to the occupation that had stolen everything but his stubborn will to endure. Each morning brought the same hollow ritual: perform his duties, avoid attention, and survive another day in the shadow of those who saw him as less than human. Will today be the day that Ivan's quiet resistance finally crosses the dangerous line between defiance and death? Ivan lowered the wooden pail onto the rough-hewn table, the water inside still trembling from his journey. The small farmhouse creaked around him, speaking in the familiar language of settling wood and winter winds. He removed his cap, revealing thinning grey hair that had once been as black as fertile soil. The movement exposed the deep lines etched across his face, a map of 60 years of labor, love, and lately, loss. He moved toward the hearth where embers still glowed faintly from the previous night. Adding precious kindling, he blew gently until flames flickered to life. The light illuminated the sparse main room, a table, 2 chairs, a shelf with few possessions. Everything of value had been requisitioned months ago. Ivan's gaze drifted to the shelf where a single photograph remained, partially hidden behind a chipped mug. He rarely allowed himself to look at it directly anymore. The image showed a younger Ivan standing proudly beside Maria, his wife of 30 years, and their son Alex, both now gone, Maria to illness before the war, Alexei to the Eastern Front 2 years ago. No letters had come for 18 months. The photograph had been taken on Harvest Day, 1938, the last good harvest before everything changed. They stood before a field of wheat, golden and abundant, their faces showing the simple pride of those who coax life from the earth. Alexei, just 20 then, had his father's broad shoulders and his mother's gentle eyes. Ivan turned away from the memory and focused on the day ahead. He retrieved a small pouch of grain from beneath the floorboards, part of his meager hidden stores. The official ration would not sustain a man through these bitter days of labor. The Germans demanded work without providing the means to maintain strength. Another form of slow execution. As he prepared his morning kosher, Ivan mentally reviewed the tasks assigned by Hauptmann Miller, the local commandant. 10 farmers were to clear the road to the neighboring village of Novaya Derevnya today. The recent snowfall had made it impassable, and the Germans required clear supply lines. Hard labor in bitter cold on half rations. It was designed to break them. Through the small window, Ivan watched the village slowly coming to life. Smoke rose from chimneys in thin, hesitant streams. Few had adequate fuel. Across the snow-covered central square, he could see old Vasily emerging from his home, bent nearly double with age, yet still required to fulfill labor quotas. Beyond him, the church stood with its doors chained shut since the occupation began. The bell that had marked the rhythms of village life for centuries hung silent. Before the war, mornings had a different quality. The smell of Maria's bread would fill the house. Neighbors would call greetings as they passed. Children would run between houses, their laughter hanging in the air. Now, people moved quickly, eyes downcast, conserving both energy and attention. To be noticed was dangerous. Ivan finished his small meal and pulled on his threadbare coat. He reached above the doorframe, fingers finding the small hollow where he kept his papers. Every citizen was required to carry identification at all times. The penalty for failure was immediate arrest, often followed by disappearance. As he stepped outside, the cold hit him anew. The sun was rising, painting the snow-covered landscape in shades of pink and gold, beauty that seemed to mock their circumstances. Ivan straightened his back, ignoring the familiar pain of old injuries. He would not shuffle or bend. The Germans had taken much, but not his dignity. From the direction of the former schoolhouse, now German headquarters, came the sound of a motorized vehicle. A small covered truck made its way slowly through the snowy street. Ivan recognized it as the one used by Miller's adjutant, a young lieutenant with cold eyes who seemed to take particular pleasure in humiliating the older villagers. Ivan joined the stream of farmers, moving toward the square for daily roll call and assignment. He nodded slightly to Nikolai Baranov, a neighbor whose farm adjoined his plot. They didn't speak. Conversations in public were discouraged, but the acknowledgement carried the weight of shared understanding. They had been through collectivization, famine, and now occupation together. Words were unnecessary. In the square, the Nazi flag hung limply in the still morning air, a dark stain against the winter sky. Beneath it stood 3 German soldiers, stamping their feet against the cold, their breath forming clouds around their pink faces. So young, these conquerors, Ivan thought. Boys playing at being men, with the power of life and death over those twice their age. The German soldiers arranged the villagers in neat rows, their breath forming small clouds in the frigid air. Ivan stood in the 3rd row, back straight despite the cold seeping through his worn boots. Hauptmann Müller emerged from the headquarters, his uniform immaculate, leather gloves creaking as he clasped his hands behind his back. Unlike the young soldiers who complained constantly about the Russian winter, Müller seemed impervious to the cold. The road to Novaya Darevnya must be cleared by sundown, Müller announced, his Russian precise but emotionless. 10 men will be assigned. The rest will continue grain processing at the mill. His pale eyes scanned the crowd. Any man found keeping grain for personal use will be shot. Any man failing to meet his quota will not receive rations for 3 days. Ivan's hand instinctively moved to his coat pocket, where his father's pocket watch rested. It had stopped working the day the Germans arrived, September 18, 1941, as if time itself had frozen. Ivan kept it as a reminder of before and a promise of after. His father had received it for 30 years of service at the same farm. Ivan now worked, back when the land belonged to the Kuznetsov family before the revolution. The assignments were read by Lieutenant Braun, Miller's adjutant. Ivan was among those selected for road clearing, the most physically demanding task. At 60, he was the oldest assigned to this duty, a fact not lost on the other villagers who glanced at him with concern. As the group dispersed, Anna Volkova passed near him. A widow in her 40s, she had taken over her husband's blacksmith shop after he was executed for suspected partisan activities. "They're testing you," she murmured, not looking directly at him. "Miller thinks you're harboring resistance members." Ivan gave no indication he'd heard her, but the warning settled in his stomach like a stone. He had done nothing to attract such attention. He'd been carefully invisible. Perhaps that was the problem. In trying to avoid notice, he'd become noticeable. The snow shovel felt heavier than usual in his hands as he joined the work detail. The road to Novaya Darevnya wound through dense forest for 5 kilometers. In peacetime it had been a pleasant walk. Now it represented a day of back-breaking labor in temperatures well below freezing. 2 soldiers accompanied them, rifles slung over their shoulders. One was Corporal Werner, a thin, nervous man who seemed as uncomfortable with his assignment as the Russians were with theirs. The other was Private Schmidt, barely 20, who took pleasure in prodding the workers with his rifle when they slowed. "My father is a farmer too," Werner said suddenly, as they reached the road. The statement hung in the cold air, unexpected and unsure what to do with itself. No one responded. Fraternization was dangerous for both sides. They worked in silence, the scrape of shovels against packed snow the only sound apart from occasional coughing. Ivan paced himself, knowing endurance would matter more than speed. Beside him, young Dmitry Sokolov worked frantically, his breath coming in ragged gasps. At 25, Dmitry had the strength but not the wisdom to conserve it. "Slower," Ivan whispered when the guards were distracted. "It's a long day." By midday they had cleared less than 2 kilometers. Schmidt paced impatiently behind them, occasionally firing his rifle into the forest to startle them. "Perhaps we should shoot one," he suggested to Werner in German, unaware that Ivan understood. It would motivate the others. Werner shook his head. "They're meeting their quota. The Hauptmann wants the road cleared, not more bodies to bury." Ivan kept his head down, shoveling steadily. Understanding German had been his secret advantage these past months. He'd learned it before the war, trading with merchants from the West. Now, it provided him with precious information and warning of danger. During their brief rest period, Nikolai Baranov shared his meager bread ration with Ivan. "You need it more than I do today," he insisted. The solidarity among the villagers remained their greatest strength. Small kindnesses kept hope alive when everything else sought to extinguish it. As they resumed work, Ivan's thoughts turned to the resistance. Rumors had circulated of partisan activity in the forests, of supply convoys ambushed and Nazi collaborators executed. Ivan had kept his distance, not from fear or lack of patriotism, but from pragmatism. The village needed some men to survive, to ensure there would be a future after the Germans were gone. Someone needed to plant the next crop, to rebuild what was destroyed. But with each passing day, as conditions worsened and villagers disappeared, Ivan questioned his choice. His son was fighting somewhere, perhaps dead, while he cleared roads for the enemy. The thought burned in him, a small ember of resistance growing hotter with each shovelful of snow. Darkness had fallen by the time Ivan returned to his farmhouse. His muscles ached from the day's labor, but the road to Novaya Derevnya was clear. The Germans had seemed almost surprised when the work was completed before sundown. No praise was offered, only a curt dismissal and the reminder to report at dawn for new assignments. Ivan lit a small candle, careful to cover the window with a heavy cloth first. Light after curfew invited unwelcome attention. He removed his boots and placed them near the stove to dry, then massaged his feet, working feeling back into his toes. Frostbite was a constant threat. 2 villagers had already lost fingers this winter. When he was certain no patrols were nearby, Ivan moved to the corner of the room. With practiced hands, he lifted a floorboard that appeared no different from the others. From the small cavity beneath, he removed a cloth-wrapped bundle and placed it on the table. Unwrapping it revealed a radio, small, battered, and illegal. Possession meant immediate execution. Ivan inserted the earpiece and turned the dial delicately, finding the frequency by memory. Static filled his ear as he made minor adjustments. Then, faintly at first but growing clearer, a voice emerged from hundreds of kilometers away. Moscow radio, broadcasting news of the war that contradicted everything the occupation authorities announced. "Soviet forces have liberated Velikiye Luki." The voice reported, "German forces continue to retreat from Stalingrad. The tide has turned, comrade." The fascist invaders face the fury of the motherland. Ivan listened intently, committing the details to memory. No paper records could be kept. Another security measure. When the broadcast ended, he carefully rewrapped the radio and returned it to its hiding place, replacing the floorboard with such precision that even someone looking for irregularities would notice nothing. A soft knock at the door froze him in place. 3 rapid taps, a pause, then 2 more. Anna's signal. Still, Ivan approached cautiously, knife in hand. Signals could be forced under duress. "The mill runs dry when birds fly south." Anna's voice came through the door. "The current passphrase." Ivan opened the door just wide enough for Anna to slip through, then quickly secured it behind her. Her face was flushed from the cold, her headscarf dusted with snow. "Patrols are heavy tonight," she whispered, removing her outer layers. Miller received visitors from the regional command. "Something has them agitated." Ivan gestured toward the stove, where a small pot of soup simmered. "Eat first, then news." They shared the meager meal in comfortable silence. Anna had become his most trusted confidant in the year since her husband's execution. Their arrangement was practical. She brought information gathered from her work at the blacksmith shop, which served many German vehicles, and he shared what he learned from the radio and his understanding of German conversations. Neither acknowledged the deeper connection forming between them. 3 trucks of ammunition passed through to the bunkers north of Novaya Derevnya. Anna finally said, setting aside her empty bowl, "They're reinforcing defenses, not advancing, and the soldiers speak of Stalingrad as if it's cursed." Ivan nodded. "Moscow radio confirms heavy German losses. They say the Red Army has broken through at Velikie Luki." A rare smile crossed Anna's face. "Then it won't be much longer. It could still be months or years." Ivan tempered her hope with caution. "And they'll be more dangerous as they lose ground." Anna reached into her coat and produced a folded paper. "From Leonid," she said, referring to her cousin in Novaya Derevnya. "The partisan group there successfully derailed a German transport train 2 nights ago. They've asked for our help identifying future targets." Ivan studied the note carefully, then held it to the candle flame, watching it curl and blacken. Helping with information is one thing. Direct action is another. The village would face reprisals. The village faces slow death already. Anna counted. Each week more disappear. The grain stores won't last the winter with these quotas. Ivan couldn't argue with her assessment. The situation was deteriorating, yet the thought of bringing more immediate danger to those who remained troubled him deeply. "There's something else," Anna said, her voice low. "Petya Kuznetsov has returned." The name sent a jolt through Ivan. Petya had been among the first young men to leave for the front. A lieutenant in the Red Army, he'd been reported killed in action a year ago. "He's with the partisan unit in the Eastern Forest," Anna continued. "He has military training, connections to the regular army. They're organizing, Ivan, not just sabotage anymore. Preparing for when the front lines reach us." Ivan was silent for a long moment. The Eastern Forest was less than 20 kilometers away, close enough to reach in a single night's journey, close enough for hope and for danger. Morning assembly brought new tension to the village square. Hauptmann Müller stood with an unfamiliar officer beside him, a major, judging by the insignias. The major's uniform was pristine, his boots polished to a mirror shine, suggesting he had arrived recently from somewhere far from the muddy reality of occupied Russia. Due to increased partisan activity, Müller announced, his voice carrying across the silent square, new measures will be implemented immediately. He unfolded a document bearing official stamps and the eagle insignia of the Reich. Grain quotas will increase by 30%. All households will submit to additional searches. Curfew begins at sundown. Anyone found outside after dark will be shot without warning. Ivan felt the collective intake of breath around him. 30% was impossible. Most families were already on the edge of starvation. The current quota left barely enough for subsistence. This new demand would ensure none survived the winter. The major stepped forward. "Furthermore," he continued in accented, but clear Russian, "each village in this district will provide a list of suspected partisan sympathizers. Those who cooperate will be rewarded. Those who obstruct will be punished." His cold gaze swept across the assembled villagers. Collective punishment will be enforced. For each German soldier killed, 10 Russians will be executed. When the assembly dispersed, no one spoke. Words were dangerous now, potentially fatal. Ivan collected his work assignment, another day clearing roads, and observed the new notice posted on the community board. The requisition document listed in precise German efficiency exactly what would be taken: grain, potatoes, livestock, even winter clothing. At the bottom, a handwritten addition to be implemented immediately. At the mill later that day, Ivan found himself working alongside Mikhail Orlov, the former schoolteacher. Now in his 50s, Mikhail had once taught German literature at the university in Leningrad before returning to his village to care for aging parents. His knowledge of German language and culture had initially made him valuable to the occupation forces as a translator, but his refusal to identify subversive elements had relegated him to physical labor. "They're desperate," Mikhail whispered, as they loaded grain sacks onto a German truck. "The Eastern Front is collapsing faster than they admit. These new quotas aren't just about punishing us, they're requisitioning supplies for a retreating army." Ivan worked silently, aware of the guard watching from the doorway. "How long?" he finally asked, his voice barely audible. "Spring, perhaps," Mikhail replied. "But we may not last until then." That evening, an emergency meeting was convened in old Fyodor's root cellar, the deepest and most secluded gathering place in the village. 10 people crowded into the earthen room, their faces illuminated by a single candle. Ivan recognized each one, the most trusted, the most careful. If they were discovered, the entire village would suffer. Anna arrived last, bringing news from the blacksmith shop. "They've posted the new quotas at headquarters," she reported grimly. "The first collection begins tomorrow at dawn. They're starting with seed grain." A murmur ran through the small gathering. Seed grain was their future. Without it, no crops would be planted in spring, ensuring famine would continue even if the Germans were driven out. "We can hide some," suggested Nikolai Baranov. "Bury it in the forest. They'll weigh what remains against previous records," Mikhail countered. "The discrepancy will be obvious. And they'll burn the village when they find out," added old Fyodor, his voice cracking with age and fear. Ivan had remained silent, weighing options against consequences. Now he spoke. "If we give everything, we die slowly. If we resist openly, we die quickly. Neither choice offers survival." The room fell silent, each person confronting the impossible calculation. "There may be another way," Anna said finally. "The partisan unit in the Eastern Forest has been expanding its operations. They've offered protection to villages that actively support them." "Protection," Fyodor scoffed. "They attack and disappear. We remain to face the consequences." "Not anymore," Anna insisted. "They're establishing permanent camps, coordinating with the Red Army. They need our help, yes, but they're offering something in return, a chance to evacuate the most vulnerable before the Germans implement the harshest measures." Ivan studied the faces around him, reading the mixture of hope and skepticism. "How would we contact them?" he asked, the question itself crossing a threshold he had carefully avoided until now. Dawn had barely broken when the shots echoed across the frozen field. Ivan, already awake and stoking his small fire, froze. 3 shots in rapid succession. Then silence. Not the methodical firing squad, something else. He pulled on his boots and coat, moving to the window with caution. In the grey morning light, he could see villagers emerging from their homes, drawn by the same sounds. 2 German trucks sped toward the northern forest road. Something had happened during the night. By the time Ivan reached the village square, rumors were already circulating. A German patrol had been ambushed 3 kilometers north. No survivors. The bodies had been discovered by a supply convoy at first light. Hauptmann Müller appeared headquarters, his face rigid with controlled fury. Behind him, the major from yesterday barked orders at soldiers who rushed to mount vehicles. The response would be swift and severe. Everyone knew what was coming. "All men report for questioning," Müller announced. "Women and children remain indoors. Anyone attempting to leave the village will be shot." The male villagers were herded into the former schoolhouse, now German headquarters. They stood in silence, avoiding eye contact with each other and with the armed guards who watched them with open hostility. Ivan found himself between Nikolai Baranov and young Dmitry Sokolov, whose hands trembled visibly. "Still yourself," Ivan whispered to Dmitry. "Fear marks the guilty." Hours passed. One by one, men were called into the adjoining room. Some returned, shaken but others did not return at all. No one spoke of what happened during questioning. By midday, only half the original group remained. When Ivan's name was called, he rose with deliberate calm, his face a mask of weathered stoicism that revealed nothing of his churning thoughts. The interrogation room held a single table. Behind it sat Lieutenant Braun, and a Chateau officer Ivan had never seen before. A soldier stood in each corner, rifles ready. Ivan Petrov, brawn red from a document. 60 years old. Former kulak. No known political affiliations. He looked up. "Where were you last night between midnight and 4 a.m.? "In my home. Sleeping," Ivan answered, his voice steady. "Can anyone verify this?" "I live alone." The Gestapo officer leaned forward. "Your farm is closest to where the patrol was ambushed. You would have heard or seen something." "I heard nothing until the shots this morning. 7 German soldiers were killed," the officer continued, his voice deceptively conversational. "Killed by cowards who attack in darkness. You expect me to believe you heard and saw nothing?" Ivan met the man's gaze directly. "I am an old farmer. I sleep heavily after a day of labor." The questioning continued, circling the same points. Ivan maintained his story with the simple consistency of truth, though it was not the whole truth. He had indeed heard something in the night, not the ambush itself, but movement near his farm an hour before dawn. Someone crossing his western field, heading toward the village. He had glimpsed a figure from his window, but had chosen to see nothing. Eventually they released him, not from belief in his innocence, but from lack of evidence and the need to process the remaining men. As Ivan exited the schoolhouse, the afternoon sun momentarily blinded him. When his vision cleared, he saw Anna cross the square, her expression communicating a subtle warning. Something had changed. Instead of returning home directly, Ivan took a circuitous route, passing by the blacksmith shop where Anna worked. As he expected, she found a reason to step outside, ostensibly to dispose of metal scraps. "My barn," she murmured as they passed. After dark, Ivan gave no indication he'd heard her. He continued his roundabout journey home, stopping to speak with an elderly neighbor, establishing his presence and movements in a public way, creating witnesses. Night fell early, as it did in winter. Ivan waited an hour after curfew before slipping out his back door. Moving from shadow to shadow using paths only locals knew, he made his way to Anna's property on the village outskirts. Her small barn looked abandoned, a deliberate appearance she cultivated to discourage German interest. Inside, a lantern burned low, its light barely visible through carefully placed coverings. Anna stood beside a figure slumped on a hay bale. A man in a blood-soaked Red Army uniform, his face pale beneath a week's growth of beard. On the floor beside him lay a torn German insignia, evidence from last night's ambush. "He managed to reach the village," Anna said without preamble. "The others scattered into the forest. He's been shot." Ivan kneeled beside the wounded soldier, assessing the damage with experienced hands. The bullet had passed through the man's shoulder, missing vital organs but leaving him weak from blood loss and exposure. Anna had already cleaned and bandaged the wound as best she could, using precious supplies from her dwindling medical cache. "Sergeant Komarov, 1117th Infantry Division." The soldier managed, his voice barely audible. "Our unit was separated during the German counterattack near Rose." "Save your strength," Ivan advised, helping the man drink from a cup of heated broth. "The Germans are searching house by house. They'll reach this area by morning." Anna's expression hardened. "We can't turn him over." "No," Ivan agreed, surprising them both with his immediate response. "But we can't keep him here either." The three of them lapsed into silence, considering limited options with unlimited consequences. The barn offered temporary shelter, but German patrols with dogs would eventually discover it. Moving the wounded man risked exposure. Keeping him meant certain death for all, if discovered. "My farm," Ivan said finally. "The root cellar has a hidden compartment. My grandfather built it during the revolution to hide family valuables." He looked at Anna. "It hasn't been opened in years. The Germans have searched the house 3 times and never found it." The decision, once made, required immediate action. Using an old horse blanket as a makeshift stretcher, they carefully moved Sergeant Komarov out of the barn. The night was moonless, offering crucial cover, but the temperature had dropped severely. Their breath crystallized in the air, as they navigated between properties, using hedgerows and drainage ditches to stay hidden. The journey of less than a kilometer took nearly 2 hours, each step calculated to avoid open ground and potential observation. Twice they froze in place as German patrols passed nearby, dogs straining at leashes, handlers cursing the cold. Ivan's knowledge of the land, every dip, rise and hidden path proved invaluable. At last, they reached Ivan's farmhouse. Instead of approaching directly, they circled to the back where an ancient apple tree provided additional cover. The root cellar doors were partially buried under snow, a fortunate natural camouflage. Ivan brushed away just enough to open one door, revealing stone steps descending into darkness. The cellar was cold but considerably warmer than outside. Earthen walls and floor held the chill at bay, while root vegetables stored on wooden shelves provided the alibi for its existence. Ivan moved to the far corner, where a seemingly solid wall concealed the hidden compartment. A specific sequence of pressure on certain stones caused a section to swing inward, revealing a space approximately 2 meters long by 1 meter wide. "It's small, but it will keep you hidden," Ivan told the sergeant as they carefully transferred him into the space. Anna arranged blankets and supplies, creating a makeshift bed that would have to serve for at least several days. "Why are you helping me?" Komarov asked, his eyes moving between the two older Russians. Ivan considered the question. "Perhaps because you remind me of my son," he answered honestly. "Perhaps because I've spent too long watching instead of acting. Or perhaps because there comes a point when survival without purpose is merely delayed death." After ensuring Komarov was as comfortable as possible, they closed the compartment, leaving only a small opening for air circulation. Ivan reorganized the cellar to hide any evidence of disturbance. Then he and Anna returned to the surface, carefully replacing the snow around the cellar doors. Back in the farmhouse kitchen, they warmed themselves by the small stove. Dawn was approaching. They had barely completed their task in time. "They'll search again today," Anna said, her hands wrapped around a cup of hot water flavored with the last of Ivan's dried mint. "When they don't find him, they'll become more desperate." Ivan nodded. "You should return home before curfew ends. If we're seen together, it will raise suspicion." Anna hesitated. "What happens now? We've crossed a line, Ivan. Now we make a choice," he replied. "Either we hide one man and hope for the best, or we commit fully to what that means." "And what does it mean?" Ivan moved to the loose floorboard where he kept his radio hidden. But instead of removing it, he lifted a different board nearby, revealing another, smaller compartment. From it he withdrew a folded piece of oilcloth. Unwrapped, it revealed a small pistol, a Tokarev TT-33, standard Red Army officer's sidearm. "My son's," Ivan explained, seeing Anna's surprised expression. "He left it when he was deployed, said it might be needed here someday. I've kept it oiled and hidden." The weapon represented more than just a means of defense. It was a commitment to active resistance, a path with no return. Once used, there would be no possibility of returning to the relative safety of passive endurance. "The sergeant will know how to contact the partisan groups," Ivan continued. "When he's stronger, we'll need to make decisions." Anna's hand covered his, warm and certain. "I think we already have." A week passed before Sergeant Komarov was strong enough to speak at length. During that time, the German searches intensified, then gradually diminished, as their attention shifted to a reported partisan sighting near Novaya Derevnya. Ivan maintained his daily routine, appearing for work assignments, keeping his expression neutral, his demeanor unremarkable. Each night he tended to the wounded soldier, bringing food and news while removing waste and soiled bandages. Anna visited every third day, approaching by different routes and never staying longer than necessary. She brought medicinal herbs and fresh bandages created from boiled cloth. Between them, they managed to keep Komarov alive and hidden, though the strain of constant vigilance took its toll. Ivan slept little, attuned to every unusual sound, every change in routine that might signal danger. On the 8th day, Komarov was sitting up, color returning to his face. The infection they had feared never materialized, though his shoulder remained stiff and painful. That evening, as Ivan changed the bandages, the sergeant spoke about the wider situation beyond their isolated village. "The German armies are in full retreat from Stalingrad," he reported. "Over 200,000 of their soldiers captured or killed. Hitler is enraged, demanding counterattacks with forces that no longer exist. How long until the front reaches us?" Ivan asked, applying the last of Anna's herbal salve to the healing wound. "Spring, perhaps summer," Komarov estimated. "But the partisans are already establishing control in areas the Germans can't effectively patrol. There's a major group operating from Bryansk Forest, another from the wetlands east of here. They coordinate with the regular army, disrupt German supply lines, gather intelligence." Ivan considered this information. "And how does one contact these groups?" Komarov studied him with new interest. "There are signs, passwords, different for each region, changed regularly. I can teach you the current ones, but they'll be updated soon." He paused. "Are you considering joining them?" "Not leaving," Ivan clarified, "but helping from here. Information, supplies, perhaps shelter for others like you." The sergeant nodded thoughtfully. "Such a network already exists. Village, cells connected to the main partisan groups. Each knows only their immediate contacts. Safer that way if someone is captured and interrogated." From his pocket, Komarov withdrew a small folded paper. Ivan recognized it as a corner torn from a German requisition form, the blank reverse side repurposed. On it were drawn symbols and written brief phrases in a shorthand Ivan didn't recognize. "Memorize this," Komarov instructed. "These markings on trees or posts indicate safe houses, German patrols, dangerous areas. These phrases identify friends. Once you've committed them to memory, burn the paper." Ivan studied the crude code, his farmer's mind accustomed to remembering weather patterns, planting cycles, and livestock bloodlines, quickly absorbing the new information. "When you're well enough to travel, where will you go?" Ivan asked, returning the paper. "Back to my unit if possible. If not, to the nearest partisan group. I can take a message, make connections for you." Komarov hesitated, "But understand what this means. Once you're part of the network, there's no stepping back. The Germans execute not just suspects, but their families, their neighbors." "I have no family left to endanger," Ivan replied simply, "and my neighbors will make their own choices." That night, after securing the root cellar, Ivan sat at his kitchen table with Anna, sharing the last of his hoarded tea. He'd explained Komarov's information and the decision before them. Now they sat in contemplative silence, the weight of commitment hanging in the air between them. "I'll need to travel to Novaya Derevnya," Ivan said finally. "The Germans will question a man my age moving about without clear purpose. I'll need papers, a believable reason." Anna considered the problem. "My forge still services their vehicles. I could create documentation requesting assistance from an experienced mechanic in Novaya Derevnya." "Would they believe a woman runs a forge?" Ivan questioned. "Lieutenant Braun already does. He's requisitioned my services twice this month for their trucks. Seems they're short of skilled labor." A ghost of a smile crossed her face. Being underestimated has its uses. By morning, Anna had created the necessary papers. Using official requisition forms and a carefully forged signature, she produced documents that would allow Ivan to travel to Novaya Derevnya and back without raising immediate suspicion. The technical language describing mechanical problems was accurate enough to satisfy casual inspection. "If they check with headquarters, we're finished," she warned, handing him the papers. Ivan tucked them into his coat, next to his identification documents. "Then I'll have to ensure they don't feel the need to check." As he prepared to leave, Anna surprised him by grasping his rough hand in hers. "Be careful, old man," she said, her voice betraying emotions neither had acknowledged. "I've grown accustomed to your stubbornness." The journey to Novaya Derevnya took most of the day. Ivan traveled on foot along the recently cleared road, his papers checked at 2 German checkpoints. At each stop, he played the role of a simple old mechanic, his demeanor deferential, but not servile. The soldiers, more concerned with the bitter cold than with one elderly Russian, barely glanced at his documents before waving him through. Novaya Derevnya was larger than Ivan's village, with nearly 300 inhabitants before the war. Now it seemed half deserted, many houses damaged by artillery when the Germans had first pushed through. The Nazi presence was more substantial here, a small garrison housed in the former government building, military vehicles parked in neat rows, soldiers patrolling in pairs. Following Komarov's instructions, Ivan made his way to a workshop on the village outskirts. The building, once a Atert repair station, now serviced German vehicles. He presented his papers to the German sergeant supervising operations, explaining in halting German that he had been sent to assist with mechanical problems. "Another one?" the sergeant grumbled, examining the documents. "Very well. Report to Mikhailov inside." The workshop was warm, filled with the smell of motor oil and metal. 5 Russian men worked on various vehicles, their faces streaked with grease, their expressions carefully neutral. A stocky man with a grey-streaked beard approached as Ivan entered. "Dmitry Mikhailov," he introduced himself quietly. "You must be from Anna Volkova." Ivan nodded, removing his coat. She mentioned problems with the distributor caps on the Opel trucks. The coded exchange complete, Mikhailov led him to a partially disassembled engine. "Work here," he instructed at normal volume. The Germans check progress every hour. "Look busy." For the remainder of the afternoon, Ivan assisted with actual repairs, his farmhand's dexterity transferring well to mechanical work. The German sergeant appeared periodically, watching for a few minutes before moving on. During these inspections, conversation ceased, all attention focused on the tasks at hand. As daylight faded, the German announced the workshop would close until morning. The workers cleaned their tools and prepared to depart. Mikhailov approached Ivan again. "You need lodging for the night. My house has space." Ivan followed Mikhailov through darkening streets to a small home near the village's eastern edge. Inside, a woman of similar age to Mikhailov prepared a meager meal of potato soup and black bread. No introductions were made. The fewer names known, the safer for all. Only after eating, with curtains drawn and voices lowered, did real conversation begin. "Anna's message said you're establishing contact," Mikhailov said, producing a small glass bottle filled with clear liquid, homemade vodka, a rare luxury these days. "I have a wounded sergeant hidden at my farm," Ivan explained. He suggested I could help coordinate between villages. Mikhailov poured 3 small glasses. "We've been operating for 6 months. Food redistribution mostly, stealing back from German storehouses what they take from us. Some intelligence gathering, message relays. The partisans in the eastern forest, do you have contact?" "Limited. They've been asking for more direct support recently. Supplies, information about German movements." Mikhailov studied Ivan carefully. "They've also asked for help with more aggressive actions." "What kind of actions?" Ivan asked, though he suspected the answer. Instead of responding directly, Mikhailov reached into his shirt and withdrew a small glass vial. Inside was a colorless liquid, no different in appearance from the vodka they drank. "Derived from belladonna," he explained, setting the vial on the table between them. "Odorless, tasteless when mixed with food. 4 drops is lethal within hours. The Germans would suspect food poisoning, nothing more." The woman spoke for the first time. "They've scheduled executions for this Sunday. 5 villagers accused of sabotage, public hanging in the square to make an example." Ivan stared at the innocent-looking vial. This was why he had come to establish communication, to join the resistance network. Yet this first requested action struck at something fundamental in him. For 40 years, he had worked the land, nurturing life from soil. The thought of deliberately taking life, even enemy life, created a deep disturbance. The Nazi officers dined together each evening, Mikhailov continued. The commandant and his staff, 6 men total. Their cook is one of ours. With this we could eliminate the leadership in one action. The partisans would attack during the resulting confusion. And the reprisals? Ivan asked quietly. Mikhailov's expression hardened. There will always be reprisals. They execute us slowly through starvation or quickly through bullets. The only difference is whether we die resisting or die submitting. Ivan thought of his son somewhere on the front lines, fighting openly. He thought of his village, slowly starving under German quotas. He thought of Maria, his wife, who had always believed in the sacredness of life. There must be another way, he said finally. If the officers die mysteriously, every Russian will be suspected. Every Russian will suffer. But if the Germans themselves create the opportunity for attack, if their own actions expose their weaknesses, Mikhailov leaned forward. What are you suggesting? Information instead of poison, Ivan replied. Details about patrol routes, ammunition storage, fuel supplies, things that allow for targeted attacks against military targets, not men eating dinner. Ivan returned to his village with more than mechanical knowledge. Hidden in the lining of his coat were detailed maps of German supply routes, information far more valuable than poison. Mikhailov had eventually agreed with Ivan's approach, recognizing that strategic sabotage could accomplish more than a handful of assassinations. The maps showed the primary routes used by German supply trucks, noting checkpoint locations, patrol schedules, and vulnerable stretches where the roads passed through forests or ravines. 3 days after his return, Ivan found an opportunity to share this intelligence with Sergeant Komarov, whose strength improved daily. The soldier studied the crude maps with professional interest, immediately grasping their significance. Perfect ambush points, Komarov observed, pointing to several locations. If we can disrupt their supply lines consistently, they'll be forced to divert troops from the front to secure these routes, or abandon smaller outposts entirely. Ivan added, their hold on these villages depends on regular resupply. Komarov nodded approvingly. You think like a tactician, not just a farmer. Farming requires strategy too, Ivan replied. Planning for weather, pests, timing the harvest. The enemy is different, but the principle remains. Identify vulnerabilities and exploit them. That evening, Anna arrived with news from her blacksmith shop. The Germans were installing new parts in their vehicles, winter modifications to withstand the Russian cold that had proven so devastating to their equipment. More significantly, she reported that fuel supplies were running dangerously low. The Germans had begun requisitioning animal fat from villagers, presumably to create alternative fuel mixtures. They're desperate, she concluded. The supply lines from the west must be stretched thin. Ivan shared the maps from Novaya Derevnya, explaining his developing plan. If we coordinate across villages, we can provide the partisans with information about every German movement in the region. They can strike where the impact will be greatest, with minimal risk to the villagers. An intelligence network, Anna said thoughtfully, but we need more people, trusted people. Together, they identified potential recruits, villagers whose hatred of the occupation outweighed their fear, who had proven themselves discreet and reliable. Mikhail Orlov, the former teacher who understood German, Nikolai Baranov, whose farm bordered the main road, allowing him to observe troop movements. Young Dmitry Sokolov, whose job clearing snow gave him legitimate reason to move throughout the village. And most surprisingly, old Fyodor, whose appearance as a feeble, harmless elder made him virtually invisible to German soldiers. They would approach each carefully, individually. No one would know the entire network, a necessary precaution should anyone be captured and interrogated. Each would have specific tasks matched to their daily routines, nothing that would attract unwanted attention. Over the next week, Ivan made contact with each potential recruit. Some agreed immediately, their resentment of the occupation having long ago overcome their fear. Others required convincing, weighing personal risk against collective benefit. By month's end, a functioning cell had been established, with Ivan and Anna at its center. Information flowed in: German patrol schedules, supply shipments, troop rotations, officer movements, all carefully verified and compiled. The most difficult challenge was establishing consistent communication with the partisan units. Direct contact risked exposure. Instead, they developed a system of dead drops, locations where information could be left and retrieved without face-to-face meetings. A hollow tree near the eastern creek, a specific grave in the old cemetery, a loose stone in the abandoned mill wall. Each location served for only 2 exchanges before being retired, reducing the chance of discovery. As February gave way to March, the first results of their intelligence work became apparent. A German ammunition truck struck a landmine at exactly the spot identified as a weak point in their defenses. A patrol failed to return from the northern forest road, where Ivan had noted a blind curve with thick undergrowth on both sides. Most significantly, a nighttime raid on the fuel depot in Novaya Derevnya destroyed the reserves that would have supplied German vehicles for the coming offensive. The occupiers' response was predictable and brutal. Curfews tightened, rations decreased, random searches and interrogations became daily occurrences. Yet they found no direct evidence linking the villagers to the partisan activities. Ivan's network operated with painstaking discretion, leaving no traceable connection. One evening, as Ivan made his rounds collecting information, he passed Lieutenant Braun on the village street. The German officer, still immaculate despite increasingly difficult conditions, nodded curtly. Ivan returned the gesture with appropriate deference, his expression revealing nothing of his role in the forces arrayed against the occupation. As they passed, Ivan noticed something new in the German's eyes, not just the usual contempt, but uncertainty, perhaps even fear. The balance was shifting, slowly but perceptibly. That night, studying the growing collection of maps and notes hidden beneath his floorboards, Ivan allowed himself a moment of grim satisfaction. The information gathered by his network had already disrupted German operations more effectively than any poison could have. Each successful partisan action based on their intelligence boosted morale throughout the region, inspiring more villagers to join the resistance. Spring arrived, transforming the landscape from stark white to muddy brown. The thaw brought both hope and new challenges. Roads became nearly impassable, hampering German movements, but also making it difficult for villagers to travel undetected across open ground. The snow that had concealed footprints and provided clean backdrops to spot approaching patrols was gone, replaced by mud that sucked at boots and tracked movements with incriminating precision. With Sergeant Komarov now fully recovered, the decision about his future could no longer be postponed. The root cellar, adequate for winter hiding, would become dangerously hot as temperatures rose. More importantly, Komarov's skills were needed elsewhere, coordinating partisan activities and providing military training to resistance fighters. The Eastern Forest Camp needs experienced officers, Komarov explained during a whispered conversation in Ivan's kitchen. They have volunteers but little tactical knowledge. Most have never fired a weapon. Ivan nodded thoughtfully. The same is true here. If the Germans retreat and the partisans engage them directly, our people will need more than information-gathering skills. That night, a small group gathered in old Fyodor's root cellar. Ivan, Anna, Mikhail, and Nikolai. Komarov explained his plan to reach the partisan camp, now swelling with recruits as German fortunes on the Eastern Front continued to deteriorate. Once there, I can establish more direct communications. Send someone to train your group in basic tactics. Weapons handling. Komarov looked at each of them in turn. But you'll need weapons first. Anna spoke up. The Germans maintain an armory in the old granary. 2 guards at all times. Too heavily defended. Nikolai objected. We'd never get in without raising the alarm. Mikhail, who had been silent until now, cleared his throat. There may be another option. The hunting cabin in the northern woods. Before the war, The party officials stored rifles there for seasonal wolf hunts. When the Germans came, I doubt anyone reported them. The hunting cabin, a small structure 10 kilometers north of the village, had been used exclusively by Communist Party officials before the war. Local farmers were forbidden to enter the surrounding woods, designated as a special nature preserve for the elite. If weapons remained there undiscovered by the Germans, it would represent an invaluable resource. I'll investigate, Ivan decided, under the pretense of gathering mushrooms. Spring porcinia emerging now, a legitimate reason to enter the forest. 2 days later, Ivan set out with a basket and a small knife, the picture of an elderly forager. He took a circuitous route, gathering actual mushrooms along the way to maintain his cover story. The hunting cabin, when he finally reached it, appeared abandoned. Door hanging partially open, windows broken by winter storms, roof sagging on one side. Inside, the cabin had been partially looted, furniture overturned, cupboards emptied, but the looters, whether German soldiers or desperate civilians, had missed the cabin's secret. Ivan knelt beside the large stone hearth, examining it with practiced eyes. His father, once a stonemason before taking up farming, had told him about the special projects, sometimes commissioned by party officials, hidden compartments, secret rooms, concealed storage. The hearthstones appeared uniform, but Ivan noticed a slight color variation in the mortar between certain sections. Applying pressure to specific points in sequence, a section of the stone floor before the hearth shifted, revealing a narrow space beneath. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth and remarkably preserved, lay 6 Mosin-Nagant rifles, 2 pistols and several boxes of ammunition. The weapons would require cleaning after years of storage, but they were intact and functional enough to arm a small resistance group. The challenge would be transporting them back to the village, without detection. They couldn't be moved all at once, and Ivan couldn't make multiple trips with his mushroom basket without arousing suspicion. The solution came from an unexpected source. As Ivan carefully rewrapped the weapons, he heard the unmistakable sound of horses approaching. Peering cautiously through a broken window, he saw a horse-drawn wagon moving slowly through the forest. The driver, bundled against the spring chill, was a woman, Anna. She stopped the wagon near the cabin, appearing to adjust the harness while scanning the surroundings. Ivan emerged cautiously, still holding his mushroom basket. "A fortunate coincidence," he remarked as he approached. "Is it?" Anna replied with the ghost of a smile. "Old Fyodor mentioned you might need assistance transporting heavy items. His rheumatism prevented him from joining you." "The wagon had a false bottom," Anna explained, "designed years ago to hide grain from government requisition teams during the collectivization period. Now it would serve to hide weapons from the Germans." They worked quickly, transferring the rifles and ammunition to the hidden compartment, covering them with a layer of early spring vegetation supposedly collected for animal fodder. As they prepared to depart, Anna handed Ivan something wrapped in cloth. "From Fyodor's personal collection," she explained. "He thought it might be needed." Ivan unwrapped the bundle to find a Tokarev pistol similar to his son's but older, and a box of ammunition. The weapon represented both protection and escalation, acknowledgement that information gathering might soon give way to direct action. Sergeant Komarov departed 3 days later, slipping away during a moonless night. Ivan watched him disappear into the darkness, wondering if the young soldier would survive to reach the partisan camp. The eastern forest had become increasingly dangerous as German patrols, frustrated by mounting partisan attacks, adopted shoot-on-sight policies for any unauthorized persons found outside settlement areas. The weapons from the hunting cabin were distributed among the most trusted resistance members. Ivan kept 2 rifles and a pistol hidden in his root cellar compartment, available for emergency defense or future operations. The remaining firearms went to homes strategically located throughout the village, creating a dispersed armory that couldn't be discovered in a single raid. Basic training occurred under the guise of ordinary gatherings, meals shared among neighbors, agricultural discussions, even a makeshift funeral for a fictional relative that allowed several resistance members to meet without suspicion. Ivan demonstrated weapon handling techniques learned from his military service decades earlier, supplemented by Komarov's more recent instruction. The villagers practiced disassembling, cleaning and reassembling the rifles, developing the muscle memory needed for efficient operation under pressure. Meanwhile, the occupation grew increasingly strained. German rations for soldiers were reduced as supply problems intensified. Requisitions from villages increased proportionally, pushing the civilian population towards starvation. Lieutenant Braun, once meticulously groomed, now appeared haggard during inspections, his uniform showing signs of wear without replacement. The young soldiers, initially confident and arrogant, developed the hollow-eyed look of men who sensed their situation deteriorating but couldn't escape it. Hauptmann Müller remained outwardly composed, enforcing discipline with cold efficiency. Yet even he showed subtle signs of stress, a tightening around the eyes, an occasional hesitation before issuing orders. The major who had announced increased quotas months earlier no longer visited, presumably recalled to more critical areas. As April advanced, bringing warmer temperatures and new growth to the fields, Anna's role in the resistance network expanded. Her blacksmith shop provided legitimate reason to interact with German vehicles and personnel, creating opportunities to gather critical information. She reported on fuel levels, maintenance schedules, weapons conditions, all valuable intelligence for planning partisan operations. Her position also placed her in regular contact with the Germans, particularly Lieutenant Braun, who oversaw maintenance operations. The lieutenant's initial professional distance had evolved into something more personal. He began finding reasons to visit the blacksmith shop, sometimes bringing small gifts, coffee, sugar, preserved fruit, ostensible payment for repair services, but clearly intended specifically for Anna. He seeks conversation more than inspections now, she reported to Ivan during one of their clandestine meetings. Speaks of his home in Bavaria, his family's vineyard. Yesterday he mentioned that this war was a mistake, though he looked over his shoulder while saying it. Ivan felt an unexpected twinge at this information. Be careful, even a disillusioned German remains dangerous. If he suspects your involvement with the resistance, he suspects nothing, Anna interrupted, her voice sharper than intended. He sees only a widow struggling to survive, grateful for small kindnesses. She softened slightly. His disillusionment is useful. He speaks more freely, reveals more than he intends. Ivan nodded, acknowledging the tactical advantage, while still troubled by something he couldn't quite name. What has he revealed recently? Plans to consolidate forces, smaller outposts being abandoned, troops concentrated in defensible positions. They're preparing for potential retreat while maintaining the appearance of control. She hesitated. And he's recommended me for special dispensation, extra rations, exemption from labor quotas. The implication hung silently between them. Such privileges came at a price, usually collaboration or intimate favors. Anna's expression challenged Ivan to voice the unspoken question. Instead, he reached into his pocket and withdrew a folded paper. I wrote this some weeks ago, he said, placing it on the table between them. Never intended to share it. Perhaps never should. Anna unfolded the paper. A letter, written in Ivan's careful hand. It spoke of finding unexpected connection amid destruction, of admiration for courage and strength, of longing for a future where feelings might be expressed without fear shadowing every word. Though it never explicitly named her, the letter's intended recipient was unmistakable. Ivan began, then faltered, uncertain how to continue. He shook his head slightly. There's no good time for such things, especially now. I only wanted you to know, in case. He didn't finish the thought. They both understood the increasing dangers they faced daily. Anna carefully refolded the letter and placed it in her dress pocket, close to her heart. When this is over, she said simply. The moment was interrupted by distant engine sounds. German trucks entering the village from the western road, both tensed, listening intently. Multiple vehicles moving at speed suggested something significant. Their personal matters would have to wait. I should return home, Ivan said, moving toward the door. Whatever's happening, we'll need to gather information quickly. Anna nodded, already transitioning back to her resistance role. I'll check the forge. They'll likely need vehicle maintenance after tattling at speed on these roads. They parted without further personal words, each heading to their position in the network, the letter burning like a promise against Anna's chest. Ivan's feelings both expressed and deferred, until a future neither could count on seeing. The German trucks brought not supplies or reinforcements, but a special detachment of Gestapo officers. Their black uniforms stood out starkly among the field grey of regular Wehrmacht soldiers. By nightfall, rumors circulated throughout the village: house searches, targeted arrests, enhanced interrogation techniques. The occupation had entered a new, more dangerous phase. Ivan gathered his core resistance members in the abandoned barn at the village edge. Mikhail, Nikolai and Dmitry arrived separately, using indirect routes to avoid notice. Anna came last, her face unnaturally pale. They have a list, she announced without preamble. Names of suspected resistance members in 3 villages, including ours. The men stared at her in stunned silence. Their careful precautions, their compartmentalized knowledge, all potentially compromised. How do you know this? Ivan asked, his voice steady despite the fear clenching his stomach. Lieutenant Braun warned me. Anna admitted. He came to the forge after the Gestapo arrived, told me to leave tonight, to go to my cousin in Tuve. Said the Gestapo brought documentation from regional headquarters, detailed information about resistance activities, names, locations, a trap Nikolai suggested. To see if you flee, perhaps, Anna conceded. But he seemed genuinely concerned. Said he was being transferred to the front tomorrow, wanted to ensure I would be safe. Mikhail, who had remained silent until now, spoke carefully. What exactly did he say about the list? Did he mention specific names, only that it was extensive, and that arrests would begin before dawn? Anna hesitated. He also mentioned a special reward had been paid to an informant for the information. The word hung in the air like a poisonous cloud. Informant. Someone within their network, or one of the connected villages, had betrayed them. Perhaps someone in this very room. Ivan made a swift decision. We disperse tonight. Gather only essential items. Use the emergency routes we established. Regroup at the Eastern Forest meeting point in 2 days. Anyone not there will be presumed captured. As the others nodded grimly, he turned to Anna. Did Braun suggest how the Gestapo acquired their information? No, but he mentioned they arrived from Novaya Derevnya first. Several arrests were already made there. Ivan's thoughts turned to Mikhailov, his contact in the neighboring village. Had he been captured, tortured, or was he the source of the betrayal? The possibilities multiplied, each more disturbing than the last. The group separated, each heading to make hurried preparations for escape. Ivan returned to his farmhouse by a circuitous route, constantly scanning for patrols. Inside, he moved with practiced efficiency, gathering only what was essential: his son's pistol, ammunition, the radio, a small cache of food. Everything else would have to be abandoned. As he prepared to leave, a soft knock at the door froze him in place. Not the resistance signal, just 3 gentle taps. Ivan raised his pistol, approaching the door cautiously. Ivan Petrov, a voice called softly from outside. I must speak with you. Quickly, he recognized the voice with shock. Lieutenant Braun, against every instinct for self-preservation, Ivan cracked the door open, pistol concealed behind his leg. The German officer stood alone in the darkness, his uniform partly concealed beneath a civilian coat. May I enter? Braun asked, glancing nervously at the street behind him. I have little time. Ivan hesitated, then stepped aside. If this was a trap, it was already sprung. Braun entered quickly, removing his cap to reveal a face lined with exhaustion and something else: fear. The Gestapo have a detailed account of resistance activities, he said without preamble. Locations, methods, names. They're particularly interested in you and Anna Volkova. Why are you telling me this? Ivan demanded, maintaining distance between them. Braun looked away. Anna has shown kindness in a place where I expected only hatred. I cannot save everyone, but perhaps... He didn't finish the thought. How did they get this information? Ivan pressed. An informant. Someone highly placed in your network. Braun reached into his coat and withdrew a folded paper. This fell from Major Hoffman's case during the briefing. I managed to take it without being observed. Ivan accepted the document cautiously. Opening it revealed a neatly typed list of names. Resistance members across 3 villages. His own name appeared near the top, alongside Anna's. But what drew his attention was a smaller list at the bottom, labeled primary sources. 3 names were listed, one from each village. The name for their village made his blood run cold. Mikhail Orlov, the former teacher, the trusted resistance member who spoke German, who had access to every piece of intelligence they gathered, who had been unusually interested in the details of their communication methods with partisans. Why should I believe that? Ivan challenged, though the document's official letterhead and stamps appeared genuine. Because I'm leaving too, Braun replied simply. My transfer orders are a formality. The Eastern Front is collapsing. I've seen the classified reports. The Reich is finished. Those of us who've served in occupation zones will face consequences. Ivan studied the man's face, searching for deception. He found only resignation and the particular clarity that comes when long-maintained illusions finally collapse. What will you do? Ivan asked. Try to surrender to the Americans or British when the opportunity comes. The Russians will show no mercy to any of us. Braun straightened his coat. I must return before my absence is noticed. The raids begin at 0400. Major Hoffman always follows precise schedules. After the German departed, Ivan stood motionless, the betrayal list clutched in his hand. If accurate, it meant their entire network was compromised. But if it was disinformation meant to sow distrust, acting on it could destroy them from within. Ivan moved through the forest with the quiet efficiency of a man who had spent decades hunting these woods. The darkness presented no obstacle to him, every route, hollow and game trail familiar from a lifetime traversing this land. Behind him, Nikolai and Dmitri followed with less confidence, occasionally stumbling on unseen obstacles. They had abandoned the village mere hours before the Gestapo raids began. From the safety of a ridge overlooking the settlement, they had watched black uniformed figures drag people from their homes. Even at a distance, the screams carried clearly through the dawn air. Ivan had made the difficult decision not to warn Mikhail Orlov of the impending arrests. If the teacher was indeed the informant, alerting him would only endanger the others. If the list was false and Mikhail innocent, then Ivan had condemned a loyal comrade to torture and likely execution. This moral calculus would haunt him regardless of its accuracy. 3 days of cautious travel had brought them to the rendezvous point, an abandoned hunter's cabin deep in the eastern forest. Anna had arrived first, having departed immediately after warning the others. Old Fyodor had not appeared and was presumed captured or killed. Of the 12 members in their immediate resistance cell, only 4 had escaped the Gestapo sweep. We should continue east, Nikolai argued, as they huddled in the cabin's single room. Find the partisan camp Komarov spoke of. We're too exposed here. Not without knowing who else escaped, Ivan countered. Others might still be making their way here, or leading the Germans straight to us. Dmitri pointed out nervously, if anyone broke under questioning, the unspoken reality hung between the few could withstand Gestapo interrogation techniques indefinitely. Given enough time and pain, most would reveal whatever they knew. Their safety depended on moving quickly and frequently. Anna, who had been watching through a crack in the boarded window, spoke suddenly. Someone's coming. Single person on foot. Instantly weapons appeared. Ivan's pistol, Nikolai's hunting rifle, Dmitri took position beside the door, a heavy wooden club raised. The approaching figure moved with the deliberate care of someone trying to remain undetected, stopping frequently to listen and observe. As they neared the cabin, features became visible. A woman, middle-aged, wearing clothes too large for her frame. Ivan recognized her with shock. "Vera Orlova," he whispered. "Mikhail's wife." Anna moved to block the door. It could be a trap. The Germans might be using her, or she might have information, Ivan countered, though he shared Anna's suspicion. When Vera was within 20 meters of the cabin, Ivan stepped partially into view, enough to be recognized by someone looking for them, but able to duck back quickly if necessary. Vera froze, then raised her empty hands to show she carried no weapons. "I'm alone," she called softly. After searching her thoroughly for hidden weapons or tracking devices, they allowed her inside the cabin. Vera's face was drawn with exhaustion and grief, her eyes hollow from recent horrors witnessed. "They took Mikhail 2 nights ago," she reported, accepting a cup of water with trembling hands. "The Gestapo and a special SS unit. They had a document, accusations that he was working with the resistance." "Was he?" Nikolai asked bluntly. Vera's gaze dropped. "Yes, but not as you think." She reached into her coat and withdrew a folded paper, a German execution order, bearing yesterday's date. "They executed him in the square at dawn today. Public hanging. The notice calls him a terrorist and saboteur." Ivan studied the document carefully. It appeared authentic, complete with official stamps and signatures. Hopton Miller's signature appeared alongside that of a Gestapo major named Hoffman. "Before they took him," Vera continued, "Mikhail told me to find you, to tell you that the Germans have detailed information about the entire network, not just our village, but Novaya Derevnya, Sokolovo, all of them. Names, locations, methods." "Did he say how the Germans obtained this information?" Ivan asked carefully. He believed someone from the partisan group betrayed them. The new leader, the one who replaced Komarov. Vera's voice broke slightly. "They executed 6 people today. The notice says 6 more will follow tomorrow, and 6 more each day until all resistance activity ceases." Anna moved to the window, checking again for any sign of pursuit. "Why did you risk coming here? They must be watching you." "Because they're planning something worse than executions," Vera replied, her voice dropping further. "I overheard the Gestapo officers. When they've eliminated the known resistance members, they'll implement the final solution for the village. Complete liquidation." The phrase hung in the air like a death sentence. They had all heard rumors of such operations in other occupied territories, entire villages wiped out, buildings burned, no witnesses left alive. "How much time do we have?" Ivan asked. 3 days, maybe 4. "They're waiting for reinforcements from the regional headquarters." Vera looked at each of them in turn. "Mikhail wanted you to know that he left something at the old mill. Something that might help." Returning to the village presented extreme risks. Yet the alternative, letting the executions continue while they fled, was unthinkable. Ivan and Anna volunteered for the dangerous mission to the old mill, leaving Nikolai, Dmitri and Vera at the forest cabin. If they failed to return by dawn, the others would continue east toward the partisan camp. They traveled under cover of darkness, using stream beds and animal trails to avoid open ground where German patrols might spot them. The journey that normally took 2 hours stretched to 5 as they advanced in careful stages, stopping frequently to listen for enemy movements. The village, when they finally approached its outskirts, was transformed. Checkpoints had been established at every entrance. Floodlights illuminated the central square where 6 bodies still hung from hastily constructed gallows. Machine gun nests covered key intersections, and patrols with dogs moved in tight patterns through the streets. "They've turned it into a fortress," Anna whispered as they observed from the cover of an abandoned barn at the eastern edge. "Getting to the mill will be nearly impossible." Ivan studied the patterns of the patrols, noting the timing and route. There's a gap in their coverage near the creek bed. If we follow it behind the Sokolov property, we can reach the mill from the rear. The old mill stood on the western edge of the village, partially concealed by a small grove of birch trees. Once the economic heart of the community, it had fallen into disuse during collectivization when larger, state-run facilities were built. Now it served as occasional storage for German supplies, its upper floors used as a lookout post due to its height advantage over the surrounding buildings. Moving with exquisite caution, they used the creek bed as planned, crawling through icy water when necessary to avoid detection. Anna's knowledge of German patrol schedules proved invaluable. She had mentally recorded their patterns during her time at the forge. "The southeast corner has a loose board," Ivan whispered as they approached the mill's weathered rear wall. "I used to slip inside as a boy when the miller wasn't looking." The board was still loose, though swollen with moisture and age. It took both of them working together to create an opening large enough to squeeze through. Inside, the mill was thick with dust and the smell of abandoned grain. Moonlight filtered through gaps in the roof, providing just enough illumination to navigate the cluttered ground floor. "What are we looking for?" Anna asked, her voice barely audible. "Mikhail was the village record keeper before the war," Ivan replied. "He maintained archives, correspondence with district officials. If he left something important, it would be where only someone familiar with local history would look." Ivan moved toward the central grinding stone, a massive wheel of granite that had once turned with water power from the adjacent creek. In the years before mechanization, the mill had been the center of village life, where farmers brought their grain and exchanged news and gossip while waiting for their flour. "The millstone has a hollow center," Ivan explained, running his hands along the stone's edge. "The miller used it to store documents, deeds, accounts, records of transactions. Together they managed to shift the heavy capstone slightly, revealing a narrow cavity beneath. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth to protect it from moisture, was a leather folder. Ivan extracted it carefully, then replaced the stone exactly as they had found it. "We need better light," he whispered, gesturing toward a small anteroom that had once served as the miller's office. The room offered marginally better protection from outside observation. Anna produced a small candle stub and matches from her pocket, a rare and valuable commodity she had salvaged from the forge before fleeing. By its meager light, they examined the contents of the folder. Inside were documents that caused both to inhale sharply. Detailed German defensive plans for the entire district, troop deployments, ammunition stores, command structures, communications protocols. Most critically, a complete schedule for the planned evacuation and cleansing operation, the euphemism for the village's destruction. It was set to begin in exactly 2 days, following the completion of the public executions. How did Mikhail obtain the... Anna wondered, turning pages with increasing astonishment. "He was their translator," Ivan replied. "They trusted him with documents, never suspecting he could be resistance." A small note in Mikhail's neat handwriting was tucked among the German paper. It read simply, "For Ivan, use this to save them. The partisan camp at Krasny Bor has been compromised. True resistance gathers at the old monastery. The bearer of my silver hairpin will be recognized as ally." Tucked into the folder was the hairpin mentioned, a simple silver item that had belonged to Mikhail's mother, recognizable to anyone from the village by its distinctive pattern of 3 small birds in flight. "He was playing a dangerous game," Ivan said softly, "feeding the Germans enough information to maintain their trust while protecting the most crucial secrets. And died for it," Anna added, a new respect in her voice for the school teacher who had sacrificed himself. As they carefully repacked the documents, a sound from the main floor froze them in place, the unmistakable scrape of a boot on wooden planks. Someone else had entered the mill. Ivan extinguished the candle with a quick pinch, plunging the small office into darkness. The leather folder with its precious contents disappeared inside Anna's coat. They pressed themselves against the wall beside the doorway, listening intent. The footsteps continued, a single person moving with deliberate care across the mill's wooden floor. "Must be here somewhere," a voice muttered in German. Ivan recognized the voice with shock. Lieutenant Braun, the German officer who had warned them about the Gestapo raids, was now searching the same location they had targeted. Coincidence seemed impossible. Anna reached for the pistol tucked in her waistband. Ivan gently restrained her hand, then leaned close to her ear. "Wait," he breathed, barely audible. The footsteps drew closer to their hiding place. A beam of light swept under the door. Braun carried a flashlight, giving him a significant advantage in the darkened building. Ivan gripped his own pistol, thumb on the safety. If the door opened, they would have no choice but to fire. The footsteps stopped directly outside. The light beam remained fixed under the door for what seemed an eternity. Then, unexpectedly, Braun spoke again, not to himself but seemingly directed at the closed door. "If someone is hiding in there, I am alone. I have information about tomorrow's executions." Ivan and Anna exchanged glances in the darkness. This could be a trap. Braun might have brought soldiers who now surrounded the building, or he might genuinely be alone, continuing the unexpected role of informant he had begun days earlier. Ivan made a swift decision. Keeping his pistol raised, he used his other hand to slowly open the door. The beam of light momentarily blinded him. "Lower the light," he ordered in German. The flashlight beam dropped immediately, illuminating the floor between them. Rather than their faces, Lieutenant Braun stood alone, still in his Wehrmacht uniform, but without his usual sidearm. His appearance had deteriorated further. Unshaven, uniform wrinkled, eyes bloodshot from exhaustion. "You found Olaf's documents," Braun stated, noticing the slight bulge in Anna's coat. "Good. They're executing the Miller's family tomorrow. I thought someone might come here first." "Why are you helping us?" Ivan demanded, pistol still trained on the German officer. Braun's expression hardened. "I joined the Wehrmacht to defend my country, not to hang civilians or burn villages." "What they're planning?" He shook his head. "Even if Germany somehow won this war, I could never return home with such things on my conscience." "The execution orders, are they still scheduled as documented?" Anna asked. "Yes, but there's a change. Hauptmann Miller has been relieved of command. Major Hoffman now oversees operations directly. He's accelerated the timetable." Braun reached slowly into his pocket, freezing when Ivan tensed. "Just papers. May I?" At Ivan's nod, he withdrew a folded document and held it toward them. The complete list of those scheduled for tomorrow's executions, and the guard rotations for the jail where they're being held. Ivan accepted the paper but didn't lower his weapon. "Why give us this?" "Because some crimes cannot be undone, but others might still be prevented." Braun's voice carried the weight of a man confronting his own complicity. "I can't free the prisoners myself, too many guards, too many witnesses, but I can provide you the means." He produced another item from his coat, a ring of keys, master keys to the jail cells. "The guard change occurs at 0300 hours. There's a 10-minute window when supervision is minimal." The offer seemed too perfect, too convenient. Anna voiced the suspicion both felt. "This could be an elaborate trap," she said. "Lead us into an ambush. Capture what remains of the resistance in one action. If I wanted to betray you, I would have brought soldiers here." Braun countered. "The mill has been under observation. Your entry was noted." This revelation sent a chill through Ivan. If they had been observed, why hadn't they been arrested already? "I diverted the patrol," Braun explained. "Seeing their reaction. Reported suspicious activity near the eastern checkpoint. They'll return within 20 minutes. The German officer placed the keys on a dusty ledger between them. "You have no reason to trust me, but those people will die tomorrow, unless someone acts tonight." Ivan studied Braun intently, searching for signs of deception. The man seemed genuine in his moral crisis, yet trusting him meant risking everything on the conscience of a single German officer. "Why not desert?" Ivan asked. "You clearly no longer believe in your cause. I will when the time is right. For now I can do more good from inside. Braun glanced toward the mill entrance. You should leave. The patrol will return soon. Use the southern streambed. It's unwatched until there were 200 hours. He turned to go, then hesitated. If you attempt the rescue, there's something you should know. Major Hoffman keeps the execution orders in his quarters, the former mayor's house. The document bears his signature alone now. Without it, the executions cannot proceed officially. Even the SS require proper documentation. With that, Lieutenant Braun departed, his footsteps fading into the darkness of the mill. Ivan and Anna remained frozen for several minutes, processing this unexpected development. The keys lay untouched on the ledger, a potential lifeline for the condemned villagers, or bait in an elaborate trap. The decision was made under a half-moon back at the forest cabin, where Nikolai and Dmitri waited anxiously. The rescue attempt would proceed, not because they trusted Braun, but because the alternative was unthinkable. According to the execution list, 18 villagers were scheduled to die at dawn, including 3 children whose only crime was being related to suspected resistance members. We need more than just the 4 of us, Nikolai argued. The jail is guarded by at least 6 men at all times. We don't have more, Anna countered, and we don't have time to find help. Ivan unfolded the guard rotation schedule Braun had provided. We focus on the moment of vulnerability, the guard change at 0300. If Braun's information is accurate, we have a 10-minute window with minimal coverage. 2 guards at the front, 1 at the rear. The plan took shape over the next hour, simple by necessity, relying more on timing and surprise than elaborate tactics. Ivan and Nikolai would neutralize the guards. Anna would use the keys to free the prisoners. Dmitri would guide them to temporary safety in the forest. Speed and silence were essential. Any alarm would bring overwhelming response from the garrison. They gathered what weapons they had. Ivan's pistol, Nikolai's hunting rifle, a knife for each person. If they succeeded, they would need to evacuate the entire village before the Germans implemented their cleansing operation. If they failed, they would likely not survive to witness the village's destruction. As they prepared to depart, Ivan took Anna aside. The unspoken emotions between them, acknowledged but deferred by Ivan's letter, now demanded recognition. The night's mission carried extreme risk. Words left unsaid might remain forever unspoken. If something happens to me, Ivan began. Anna stopped him with a gentle touch to his weathered face. Nothing that needs saying now will be easier to hear later, she said softly. We both know what exists between us. It will still be there when this is over. Under cover of darkness, they approached the village from different directions. Ivan and Nikolai used the southern streambed as Braun had suggested, finding it indeed unwatched as promised. This small verification of the Germans' information provided marginal reassurance. Anna and Dmitri circled to approach from the eastern side, using the abandoned buildings there for cover. The jail, formerly the village administration building, stood on the north side of the square, directly across from the gallows, where shitty bodies still hung as grim warning. German efficiency was evident in the building's conversion windows barred, entrances reduced to a single front door and rear service entrance, floodlights illuminating all approaches. From his concealed position beside the blacksmith shop, Ivan observed the guards, 2 at the front entrance as expected, smoking and conversing in low voices. The square itself was patrolled by a single soldier, making circuits at precise 10-minute intervals. Timing their move between these patrols would be critical. At exactly 0250, the pattern changed as predicted. A detachment of 4 soldiers approached from the direction of the German headquarters, ready to relieve the current guards. This was the vulnerable moment. The changeover created brief confusion, relaxed alertness, and crucially predictable positioning of all personnel. Ivan raised his hand, signaling Nikolai, who waited in a shadowed doorway 20 meters away. Both men began moving silently around the square's perimeter, using the darkness between floodlights to approach the jail undetected. The patrol soldier had just completed his circuit, giving them maximum time before his return. When the relief guards were within 5 meters of the jail entrance, the exchange of formalities began. Salutes, brief status reports, the formal handover of responsibility. All attention focused on this ritual, precisely as Ivan had counted on. He and Nikolai closed the final distance in a rush, weapons raised. The night erupted in controlled violence. Ivan struck the nearest guard with his pistol butt, driving him to the ground before he could cry out. Nikolai dispatched the second with similar efficiency. The relief guards, momentarily frozen in surprise, reached for their weapons too late. Ivan fired twice, the sound deafening in the night silence. Both shots found their targets. Immediately a whistle sounded from the square. The patrol guard had spotted them. Ivan spun, fired again. The guard dropped, but the damage was done. Lights began appearing in windows across the garrison area. They had minutes at most before full response. "Now!" Ivan shouted. Anna emerged from concealment, sprinting toward the jail entrance with the keys ready. Nikolai dragged the fallen guards inside while Ivan covered the square, watching for approaching reinforcements. The interior of the jail was austere, a central corridor with cells along both sides. Anna worked quickly, moving from cell to cell, unlocking doors with the master key. Terrified faces peered out, friends and neighbors, now gaunt from limited rations and harsh treatment. Among them were old Fyodor, the miller's family, and others whose names had appeared on Braun's execution list. "Follow Dmitri," Anna instructed each group as they emerged. "Move quickly, stay together." Outside, the situation deteriorated rapidly. Shouts echoed across the square. Lights swept the area as Germans emerged from barracks and headquarters. A truck engine roared to life and fired at shadows moving across the square, attempting to buy precious seconds for the evacuation. Nikolai joined him, the hunting rifle cracking in the night, more precise than Ivan's pistol but slower to reload. From the jail entrance, Dmitri appeared, leading the first group of freed prisoners. "This way," he urged, guiding them toward the prearranged escape route. "Quickly, quickly!" Spring sunlight warmed Ivan's face as he knelt in the freshly turned soil. His weathered hands pressed a seed potato into the earth with practiced care, the first planting since the village's liberation 3 weeks earlier. Around him, others worked similar rows, their movements carrying the weight of ritual, of reconnection with land that had nearly been lost forever. The rescue operation that night had succeeded, though not without cost. 2 villagers had been killed in the escape, and Nikolai had taken a bullet in his shoulder that still limited his mobility. But 18 scheduled for execution had been saved, and nearly 200 villagers evacuated before the Germans could implement their destruction order. What no one had anticipated was the Soviet offensive that launched that same night, a massive push that caught the German forces unprepared. The resistance activities, the intelligence provided by Ivan's network, the supply disruptions, the constant pressure on isolated garrisons had created vulnerabilities that Russian commanders exploited with devastating effectiveness. By dawn, advance units of the Red Army had reached the outskirts of the village. The Germans, already responding to the jailbreak, found themselves caught between escaping villagers and advancing Soviet forces. Most surrendered, though some, including Major Hoffman, fought to the death.